Welcome to the Heritage Foundation, and thank you so much for joining us to learn about this landmark Supreme Court case on freedom of religion and freedom of expression. We will be hosting one panel each month about this case, so please tune into our website for details about upcoming panels. This case is important to all Americans. The question the court will face is whether the state may force people to create art or express themselves or run their businesses according to their own beliefs or according to what the government tells them they should believe. Specifically, the belief that marriage is the union of one man and one woman. But what's at stake here goes far beyond the issue of marriage. It's a question of whether the First Amendment to the Constitution protects all Americans at all times. Some Americans think that this case does not affect them because they are not in the wedding industry. But this is not true, because the laws that are used to punish people that you'll hear from today are supposed to protect people on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity from systematic discrimination, but they're being misused to punish people who hold beliefs about marriage that shouldn't be punished because the Supreme Court called them decent and honorable beliefs and called these people decent and honorable. These laws are being used in a variety of professions. In California, hospitals are being sued for not performing sex reassignment surgery. In Illinois, people who want to foster children are being prevented from doing so because they won't consent to the idea that gender identity is fluid. And schools across the country are being told that they must allow children of different biological sexes to use the same showers and the same bathrooms, and they're being sued. Firefighters, CEOs, and entertainers have lost their jobs because of their beliefs. And this has made many Americans in many professions live in fear, and that the government will threaten their livelihood as well. Other Americans believe that this case doesn't affect them because they're on the right side of the law. But with all due respect, this is very short-sighted. What was once orthodox, the belief about marriage being between one man and one woman, is now considered to be heresy in our culture. But that means that what is considered to be orthodoxy today could also become heresy tomorrow. Therefore, those who believe they are on the right side of this issue because they support same-sex marriage are not taking into account that once we allow the government to take away our freedoms, that endangers freedoms for all. So this issue is not just about the people who you will hear from today, but they represent the best of America because they are seeking to live their lives, to run their businesses, and to create art according to their deeply held beliefs, according to their consciences. And this is what the founders came here to do as well. So please join me in welcoming my colleague from our co-sponsor, Alliance Defending Freedom, Kelly Fedoruk, who will tell you more about the panel and more about the case. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, and a huge thank you to the Heritage Foundation, to Emily and all of her colleagues for hosting this incredible event. We are so appreciative to their partnership in this alliance as we work to stand for freedom for everyone. And thank you to everyone who's here with us today in the audience and everyone who's also watching online at home. It's a pleasure to be with all of you as we talk about these very important issues. One of America's greatest contributions to the world has been its protection for free expression and for religious freedom. America's unique in that we not only have the freedom to believe in our minds, as many people throughout the world have, but America's unique because we have had historically the freedom to live and to work and to live out those beliefs in our day-to-day lives. And the men and the women that you'll have the privilege of hearing from today, they have found themselves caught in the middle of a firestorm. But before we dive in and actually hear from them, hear about the human cost of what happens when the government tries to suppress and compel speech and compel expression, I want us to think about 3 points, 3 more 10,000-foot points about the importance of the First Amendment. First, religious freedom and rights of conscience, they benefit everyone, Whether you're religious or non-religious, whether you're an atheist, whether you're a Catholic, whether you're Jewish, these freedoms benefit everyone because they allow all of us to explore the mystery of life, find its meaning, and then to order our lives consistent with the meanings that we find. Secondly, religious freedom and the freedom to express ourselves consistent with our convictions, it also allows human flourishing. In fact, it sometimes requires us to support causes that allow human flourishing. In fact, a recent study looked at the contribution that faith-based organizations made to the economy at a tune of $1.2 trillion a year. By way of economic perspective, that is more than the global annual revenues of tech companies like Apple and Microsoft combined. So religious freedom allows this. It allows that human flourishing to take place. It is something good, despite what we've heard recently in the media, that somehow passing laws to protect free speech and free exercise of religion is somehow a license to discriminate. And third, and perhaps most importantly, civil liberties travel together. You may not care about free speech or free exercise right now, but if you look at other countries that have seen religious freedom minimized, check out how their economies are doing. How are minorities treated? How are women treated? Because these liberties travel together, and religious freedom promotes diversity. It promotes dialogue for all of us to come together and have that freedom to disagree. So civil liberties do travel together, so what happens to First Amendment freedoms, they matter for all of us, regardless of what our viewpoints might be. Our Supreme Court has explained that the freedom to differ is not limited to things that do not matter much. That would be a mere shadow of freedom. The test of its substance is the right to differ as to things that touch on the heart of the existing order. So regardless of what one's viewpoints may be on marriage, the issues that control in the cases we're about to hear about, they transcend any current dialogue, whether that's about abortion or whether that's about about marriage. These are principles that transcend and should matter to each and every one of us that care about the freedom to live consistent with our viewpoints without fear of government punishment. So you don't have to take my word for it. I wanted to start and share a video and have us watch this video as we consider these three important points.
Everybody in our country should care about right of conscience in all aspects of our public life. When someone else comes and dictates that you must do something against your conscience, it brings us back to some of the worst times in history. Everybody should care about this because if we're the first or some of the first to be targeted, it is assured that other professions will eventually be targeted.
Religious freedom helps everyone. It's not just freedom for me, it's freedom for everyone.
It's bigger than just this one person. It's about the freedoms for all of us to live by our conscience.
We were meant to be free. The world is a place that flourishes, that grows under freedom.
When the government ceases to allow each and every one of us to be free to live and to work consistent with our beliefs without fear of government punishment. So my question for each and every one of us today is, will we take a stand for freedom? For those who agree with us and for those who disagree with us, will we take a stand? And here with me today are 5 men and women, courageous men and women who have taken such a stand. So I'd like to invite up to the stage now at this time Blaine Adamson with Hands On Original from Kentucky, Jack Phillips, who owns Masterpiece Cake Shop from Colorado, Barron Ellis, who is the owner of Arlene's Flowers from Washington State, and Carl and Angel Larson, who own Telescope Media in Minnesota. I'd also like to invite up one of their attorneys who's lead counsel for both Masterpiece Cake Shop and Arlene's Flowers, 2 cases that are currently pending before the U.S. Supreme Court. Kristen is also our senior counsel and senior vice president of the U.S. Legal Division at Alliance Defending Freedom. And last, but certainly not least, my friend and colleague, Ryan Anderson, who's the William E. Simon Senior Research Fellow. He will moderate this wonderful panel. Please join me in welcoming them.
Add my word of Thanks to all of you for being here and to the panel for standing up for what you believe in, for sharing your stories today. The purpose of today's panel is not to get too far into the legal weeds, but really to let you know the real people behind these cases. Because you'll see the headlines, you'll see the stories, you'll hear about oral arguments sometime this fall at the Supreme Court. But the media doesn't do as good of a job of actually showing the real humans behind these stories and the human costs of violating fundamental human rights. So I want to start with you, Jack, because this is your year. The court's going to hear your case. Yeah. Most people will have heard a headline, something that says something like, Baker refuses to serve gay customers. And that headline's inaccurate. But before we get to the specifics of what got you in legal hot water, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your bake shop. Why did you name it Masterpiece Cake Shop? Tell us about your logo. Tell us about your love for both art and baking.
Okay. We opened Masterpiece Cake Shop back in 1993, so 24 years ago last weekend. When I graduated high school, I needed a job, and so a man that lived across the street from me owned a big wholesale bakery, and I went to work for him. It was kind of natural. I grew up with his son, and my brother would work for him, and my sister would work for him. And I found shortly after I got acclimated actually working for a living that I loved baking. I liked the pace, I liked the work, I liked the people that I worked with, I liked the products that we got to create. I just liked everything about it. And a few years after I started working there, a couple of years after I started working there, this man he bought out another bakery, and they had cake decorating, which I had never seen. And when they brought these cake decorators in, I thought, that's really cool. Because when I was in high school, I would spend all the time that I could in the art room. Every elective that I could take, I would take drawing. I would take drawing 2, drawing 3, drawing 4, whatever, just so I could be down in the art room, and you get credits for doing that. So that's pretty cool. But then I saw that they could make cakes that were art. And so I could take the two passions that I had, baking and the art, painting, drawing, sculpting, everything, and combine them into one. And so I knew right off when I started working in the bakery that that's what I had planned on doing. And then when I saw this, I knew that eventually I would open my own shop, and it would be a place exclusively to make cakes to help people celebrate their special events in their life and do it in the most artistic, creative ways that I could. So we started putting money away, and eventually we got enough money. We bought ovens, we took care of all that stuff, and came up with the name Masterpiece Cake Shop. Our logo is like a painting palette, and it's got a French whip and paintbrush in it to combine baking, cooking, and art together. And it's called Masterpiece because masterpiece signifies art, and Cake Shop because it's a cake place. So no mixing that up. We want to do art. We want to do it with cakes. But also part of the meaning of masterpiece is master. And that comes from, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said that no man can serve two masters. I love the one and hate the other, love this one and despise that one. Said, you can't serve God and money. And I didn't open this so I could make a lot of money. I did this, open it up so that it would be a way that I could create my art, do the baking that I love, and serve the God that I love in ways that hopefully every way would honor him.
Thank you. Can you tell us more about what goes into making a wedding cake? How do you, I have trouble making toast. So I'll plead ignorance that it's hard. I think it's hard for many people to empathize because they're not a creative professional, and they're certainly not a creative baker. And they're like, oh, it's just baking a cake. Can you tell us what really does go on when you're baking one of these cakes?
There are different skills involved in baking a cake, period, than there are in making toast. But beyond just the baking end of it, which is important because I make the palette that I make. I create the icings, mix the colors that I'm going to use. I make the frosting. I make the canvas that it's going to be the finished product. But the wedding cake itself has so much significance because it's part of a wedding and a marriage. And so when the bride comes in, it's important that I like to sit down and talk to them. I like to find out where they met, how they met, what kind of interests they have, what she wants in her wedding cake, because this is not going to be just a cake that they're going to eat. This is going to be a piece of art, hopefully, that I create that meets all of her needs. So maybe they met hiking or outdoors. I find out common interests and hobbies and see what direction she wants to go. So if she wanted to do a hiking theme in her wedding, which wouldn't be unusual, especially we live in Colorado, it's still the wedding cake. When you walk into a room like this, you know it's a conference room. But if you walk into the same kind of conference room and there's a table sitting there somewhere with a cake on it, 3-tiered cake, you know you've walked into a wedding reception because it's just significant all the way around. It's that important. So to get all the combination of all the different components, the cake itself, the shape, the design, and the artistic talents and endeavors and abilities that go into making that all at the same place. That's really fulfilling for me.
Great, thank you. We're gonna come back to Jack a little later to hear more about this specific case, but I wanted to start just by having you get a chance to get to know a little bit more about him and about Masterpiece. But I want to turn to you, Carl, because your company, Telescope Media, has a similar story behind its name and what you and your wife hope to accomplish through your vocation, your professional vocation. And so I just wanted to ask you to share some of that with us.
Sure. Yeah, our journeys are very similar, actually. Jack and I both loved art. When I was in high school, I took as many art classes as I could, as well as many science classes as I could. And so it was kind of this interesting combination where I had this really kind of nerdy technical side and this really artistic output. And when I was in college, I discovered two things. One, I discovered who Jesus was, that I really wanted to follow him, and I wanted everyone to know about him. And I also discovered my dad got a new video camera, and I could plug it into my computer on spring break. And so I started making videos. And I started making videos pretty early on as attempts to tell people about Jesus. And I loved doing that. Later, after I graduated, I worked at an advertising agency as well. And so I get to work with a broad range of people, but every project that I work on, story is central. I haven't done a project that doesn't, that is of conflict to my conscience, no matter who I'm working with. And so Telescope Media Group exists to glorify God through top quality media production. And I got the idea from a theologian in Minneapolis, John Piper. So I was a physics major in college. So when I wasn't reading the physics textbook, I was reading a sermon in the library usually. This is how I'd spend my days. And one of the ways he talked about it was that God is glorified like a telescope. Microscopes make small things look big. And that's what the world generally thinks, that God's not relevant, he's small, and we're making a big deal of something that isn't that big of a deal. But a telescope helps you see something like it really is. It removes obstacles from seeing reality truly the way it's meant to be seen. And so we want to create media and work on projects and celebrate stories that make the world look more like the way it truly is, the way God created it. And so that's what we do, and we love it.
Great, thank you. The first case that we're going to get to is a win, because I think it's actually important for us to start with a victory. And so, Blaine, that means I'm turning to you. Can you tell us, we saw you in the video, so we know a little bit about your situation. Tell us about Hands On Original. Tell us about what happened to you with the case, what's 5 years ago now, the legal journey you've been on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. My journey is a little bit different than these guys. I started in T-shirts when I was in college, but I wasn't a believer. I wasn't a Christian. I was actually doing shirts for my fraternity, and they were party shirts. I was a Delt at the University of Kentucky. So they were always, a party would come up, a thing would come up, and I just used my artistic skills to create something with another local T-shirt shop. And along the way, a guy showed up at our fraternity house one day, and he challenged me to a game of basketball. And he said, if I lose, I have to come to his Bible study. And I kind of sized the guy up and thought, I can take this guy. So,
He's good.
Needless to say, he beat me, and I ended up having to go to this Bible study, which I didn't want to go to. And but through that, I ended up coming to know the Lord, and suddenly my shirts changed, the things that I began to do. And so one of the things about I noticed is that Christian T-shirts were terrible. I mean, they were so cheesy. I mean, anyone who's seen a lot of Christian shirts, you just kind of put your head down. You don't want to read it. So I wanted to create shirts that were culturally relevant and that kids would actually want to wear at the end of the day, not just at the event, but pull them out of the drawer, take them to school. So that kind of became my focus and how I started doing hands-on originals.
And so you've turned down several requests for messages you couldn't communicate. Tell us about some of the other T-shirts first.
Okay.
And then tell us about the one that got you in hot water.
Okay. Well, yeah, we've been doing this for over 20 years, so we've had several requests that my conscience just couldn't allow me to print. And one I would think of is we had a biker group of women who came in and they had just said biker bitches real big on the front, and just something I felt like we couldn't print. We've had, strip clubs and, some violence-themed shirts that we couldn't do. There's some that's funny in the office. We had a youth group come in and they wanted a bucket of chicken with Jesus on it. And it was just something that I felt my conscience, it just seemed disrespectful. And I know what they were trying to accomplish, but just for me, it just wasn't something we could do. And we actually had a pastor come in and he wanted to print a shirt that it was a black shirt, white text, and it said homosexuality is sin. And, that was just something as well that I felt like my conscience didn't feel good printing that message just that way. It felt wrong. So we've declined all kinds of messages over the years, and we've got a local print shop that we've worked out a deal many years ago that, hey, if something comes in our door that I can't print, I want to make sure the customer's taken care of. So they take all our orders that we can't print. So we've kind of got a nice relationship that way.
And I just want to highlight that because that's a really important point that I think the media misses in this. It's not that you're turning away a customer because of who he or she is.
No.
It's because the message that they're asking you to print is something you can't communicate.
Right. We'll work with anyone, regardless of what their beliefs are. It's about the message that we're asking. I mean, you think about the bucket of chicken shirt. We worked with that church for years, but there's a line that we all have,
Right.
and it just went against my conscience.
So what got you in trouble?
Well, the shirt came in. One day we got a call, and they said that they had spoken to me and gotten a quote, but I traditionally don't give quotes. We have sales reps who handle all that. But they asked for me, so I wanted to take care of them. And they had a shirt to come in for the Lexington Pride Festival, where it said Lexington Pride Festival. And I asked them to, because I hadn't seen the shirt, so I asked them to describe it to me, what they wanted. And then once they told me the details about the design, I just said that's something that my conscience won't allow me to print. And so I told them, hey, we've got another printer. I'll transition everything over for you. It'll be taken care of. But that's kind of opened the door to the lawsuit. We got there's a lot of things that happen after that. Let's just say that.
Do you want to, what's the current, I mean, you've won this case.
Correct.
We'll come back to some of the nasty stuff that has happened in between, which I imagine you're referencing when you say there's stuff that's happened. But,
Yeah.
What did the Kentucky court say in your case?
Well, the details, that's more of a legal side. I don't know if the legal wants to jump in.
We can pitch it to the attorney.
Yeah.
Well, the court said in Blaine's case that when he's printing a message, he's involved in the artistic process of designing that message and what that message is, and that's covered under the free speech clause, and that he has the right not to express messages that would violate his conscience. The case started in the lower courts at the trial court, and Blaine won there. The government then appealed it to the Court of Appeals, and right now we're waiting. 5 years later, this case is still going on, and the Kentucky Supreme Court is deciding whether it will hear the appeal again. The government just will not let it go.
But you have had surprising allies. There's
Yes.
actually been a diverse coalition of people who may disagree with your beliefs,
Sure,
but agree
absolutely.
with your freedom not to violate your beliefs. Can you tell us about that?
Right, we've had several, and one that sticks out to me is there's a lesbian screen print company up in New Jersey, and we've struck a really great relationship. I actually flew up last February just to connect, and we've talked on the phone a few times, and they want us to fight this fight because they say, even though we disagree, we both, agree to disagree on the issue, that they don't want to be forced to print messages that conflict with their conscience, that, our freedoms travel together, and they see that. So it's just been an interesting road. We stay in touch, and they just want to make sure that we don't give up.
Yeah, that's so encouraging to hear that people can be in favor of gay marriage without thinking that the government should coerce other people into being in favor of gay marriage.
Right.
It's really important to say that freedom can be a two-way street on this question. And building that bridge and that kind of this diverse support that you've had, I want to bring Angel in on this, because when I was at the ADF meeting I guess it was back in June or July, you and Carl were sharing your story, and you were talking about your family, and you were talking about the dining room table that you had, you were talking about your children, talking about the experience of sharing a meal at your house, and that you're intentional about trying to welcome a diverse group of people through your lives as a ministry.
Yeah.
Can you share that with us?
Yeah, we have a 12-foot table at our house, and the first time that you come to our house, you get to sign your name underneath our table with a Sharpie. And it's just a way to make you feel like you're our family, you're a part of us. And we're really intentional about the meals and inviting people in, especially the international students in our community that go to the college just a couple miles down the road, because many of them go years without ever experiencing American family. And so we bring them in and we love them, and we share diverse food and culture and language. And because I have 8 children, it's really hard to travel the world with 8 children. It's, and so, but we can bring the world to our table, and it's just such a glorious experience. And as a matter of fact, we're actually having a gathering on Sunday where I know at least 10 nations are going to be represented coming over and sharing a meal with us.
And I imagine you don't all agree on questions, political,
No.
theological.
No, it's a lively discussion sometimes, especially with, when you're 19 years old, you think that you know everything about the world, and it's been fantastic.
But it's actually our belief on marriage and our belief in Jesus that draws us to people who are different than us. So one of the misconceptions is that, oh, you're walling yourself off. You live in your own echo chamber, and for us, it's exactly the opposite. Because we're followers of Jesus, we want to hang out with people who are different than us. We want to understand you. We want to love you for who you are, regardless of where you come from, because that's what Jesus did for us.
That's a great segue, Barron Ellis, to your story, because I think most people here probably are familiar with Barron Ellis' case. She's the florist, the grandmother florist who, in your case, you were serving a particular customer for 9 years. And you knew you disagreed with him on various things, he disagreed with you on various things, and that didn't in any way interfere with your friendship. And then you found yourself being sued by him.
Rob was one of my favorite customers, and he's very creative, and he's very funny. And he would come in and say, I want a birthday arrangement, or I want an anniversary, or we're having a party. This is the theme I want. Here's the vase I picked out. Now you just do your thing. And I love that because I got to be creative, go out of the box, create something different and unique for him. And he loved my arrangements, and I loved doing them for him.
And then what happened?
Well, I knew Rob was coming in to talk about getting married because he'd been in twice before. And so when he came in and started talking about his wedding, I just gently put my hands on his, and I said, Rob, I'm sorry I can't do your wedding because my relationship with Jesus Christ. And he says, I understand. He says, I'm hoping my mom will walk me down the aisle. He said she sort of feels the same way. And we talked about his, why he got engaged. We talked about his wedding plans, and we had a nice conversation. And he asked if I would recommend another florist, which I recommended 3 that I knew would do him a good job. And we hugged each other, and Rob left.
And then what happened?
Well, his partner, Kurt, put something on Facebook just to the fact that, she has the right to believe the way she does, but she really hurt our feelings. And that went viral. And the Attorney General, without any complaints, filed a lawsuit against us personally and corporately and said, you'll do weddings, you'll do gay weddings, same-sex weddings, or else you won't do anything. And then the ACLU got a hold of Rob and Kurt, and they also filed a lawsuit against us personally and corporately. So we're sort of in a mess.
And I'm going to direct this at Kristen. When you say you were sued both personally and professionally, what exactly does that mean? What's on the line here?
That means for a 72-year-old grandmother in a community property state who's married, she will lose everything she owns. if she loses this lawsuit. It means life savings, home, retirement. We're wondering about Dingo the dog. They're going for it all, which I think demonstrates this isn't about even so much of whether you should support marriage as it is we're going to silence, ruin, and punish anyone who disagrees, because that's what's happening to Barron Ellis, and it's what's happening to Jack as well.
I'm not familiar with Washington State, but do evangelical Christians have a monopoly on the flower business? Was Rob able to get wedding flowers elsewhere?
They were-
I mean, it just seems that there's an imbalance between what's at stake for
they
you.
went to another florist and got flowers, but they were also offered enough flowers to do 20 free weddings.
That was in their deposition, by the way. Barron Ellis didn't just come up with that. That was their testimony. They received overwhelming public support and offers for 20 free weddings.
And you're at risk of losing your life savings.
Yes, sir.
What would you say if Rob came back to your store tomorrow when you get back home?
I'd be so excited if Rob came into my store. I would wait on him another 10 years. I would hug him and catch up on his life. He is missed.
Thank you. Jack, your case is similar in Barron Ellis in certain respects in that you told actually, why don't we back up because we haven't even started down the road of your case. Why are you at the Supreme Court?
I'll start back at July 2012. Afternoon that these two gay men came in, and they sat at my wedding desk, a wedding album open. They were sitting there, and they had a folder with them. And so they were looking at the wedding pictures. And the two girls I had working for me were both busy at that time, so it fell to me to sit down and wait on them, talk to them. And so I came around the corner. We made introductions, and one of them said, yeah, we're here to look at wedding cakes. And the other one said, it's for our wedding. And so right away, I'm thinking, how can I tell them politely that I can't take care of this wedding for them because I don't do same-sex weddings. That's just against the core of who I am. And so I said, sorry guys, I don't do cakes for same-sex weddings. And they looked surprised and said, what? I said, I'll make you birthday cakes, shower cakes, cookies, brownies, basically tell them I'll do anything else for you. It's not you, it's just I can't do a cake for this event. But they both got angry and stood up, stormed out of my shop. One of them flipped me off and swore at me. And so I went back to work and I thought, well, that was not quite what I was expecting. And then about 20 minutes later, the phone rang. And again, the two girls were still busy. And so it was my job to answer the phone. I'm third in line. So I pick up the phone, and somebody says, so are you the baker who just turned away the gay couple? I said, no, I just turned away the opportunity to make a same-sex wedding, but I would never turn away a gay couple. And that's not a quote. That's just, the gist of what I would say. I wouldn't turn away a gay couple. I serve everybody. Anybody that comes to my shop, I would gladly serve. But I don't make cakes for all events. That wasn't good enough. They swore at me, hung up. Well, that wasn't what I was expecting either. So I told the girls, I think I'll answer the phone for the rest of the day because that's not my job. But by the time we had closed an hour later, I had like 6 phone calls like that. Like, this is not what you expect at the end of your day, to have people swear at you without even knowing who you are. You pick up the phone, you answer it, and they start swearing. And like, wow. And we eventually also got threats. I had somebody call one day and say that he was on his way and he was going to come and shoot me in the head. And that's bad enough, but my daughter was in the shop then, and she has a 4-year-old girl who was with her while she was working. So I called the police. I told her, said, you need to get in the back. Somebody's threatened to come and kill me here. So go in the back, don't come out until I tell you otherwise. Called the police. The police came. They tried to trace the phone call, but to no avail, and the guy didn't show up. But the threat, whoever was making the threat, knew that my daughter was there, told me what streets they were on. I'm turning on this street, I'll be there in a couple minutes, that kind of thing. So I know this is pretty legitimate. So that's when I called the police. And they couldn't trace anything. But that was kind of the way things went for weeks. It's not my job to answer the phone, that's what I pay these girls for. But for a long time, I would answer the phone because of the threats and the hateful calls, emails, that kind of thing.
So, in listening to your stories and hearing the death threats made at you, your fear for your children and your grandchildren, Barron Ellis, everything you stand to lose, and then seeing your personal demeanor, it strikes me that you weren't going looking to be sued. This is not something you sought out. You weren't trying to provoke customers or an attorney general into suing you. And it strikes me that it's interesting that, Blaine, you've so far been successful in court because the T-shirt had words on it. And I think people can understand why you wouldn't want to have to print words that you disagree with. But obviously, you've all put so much on the line because you understand your art and your vocation as a professional to be expressive as well, in a way that some of us, I'm a writer, so I get why I wouldn't want to have to write words that I disagree with. I think it might be harder for the rest of us, and why are you risking all of this? And so I just wanted to, it's more or less open to any of you. What's the big deal about marriage? What's the big deal about the wedding flowers, about the wedding cake, telling the wedding story in a video? Why?
The wedding itself, marriage, is a picture of Christ and his church, and we represent his church here. And with the wedding cake in particular, like I say, you walk into a conference room and you see a cake, there's a wedding, and generally 3 tiers are there, and it's to signify the husband and the wife united with Christ. And they put their hands together and they cut the cake to, as this symbol of unity and going forward in this relationship to honor God in everything they do. So the cake itself is expressive. And then just the creating of the cake is artistic. It's an artistic expression where I sometimes paint, I sometimes sculpt, I do a lot of different artistic endeavors to create this thing.
And every one of your wedding cakes is custom. Do I understand that correctly? It's not like you kind of have,
No.
I'll just make you the same one I made last week for the other guy.
Yeah.
And you offered to sell all of the items that are like that, the brownies, the cupcakes, the cookies.
Our showcases are open. People come in and buy stuff all day long. But the custom cakes that we create are custom cakes. People don't come in for a wedding cake just for, I'll take a wedding cake today. They come in for a custom cake, and we sit down and design it personally.
Carl, you look like you wanted to jump in on this.
There's a lot to it for us. One, I think marriage is central. For us as storytellers, we want to tell the truth as we see through the Bible. And from the beginning of the Bible to the very end, you have a wedding in a garden, and at the end, you have a marriage celebration. And so we're exactly right when saying marriage is the means by which God expresses himself or communicates who he is to the world through the Bible. So marriage is a really big, unique issue. And it's not just simply that we don't want to participate with someone because who they are. It's just simply we can't tell that story. So we'll work with anyone. We absolutely will, but it's because of the overall narrative of the biblical faith that we can't violate that.
Ryan, I'll just add to that. You talked a little bit about the difference between words and symbols, and that maybe Blaine won because he had words potentially. That might be true, but I think there are a couple of other things that need to be pointed out on that. One is Blaine's in Kentucky. Jack and Barron Ellis are in Colorado and Washington. And when a case is brought before a court, the jurisdiction matters. The judges that are sitting on the bench, the culture, the climate there matters in terms of the outcome. The second thing I would point out, well, I'm going to say 3 things. The second thing is the First Amendment provides broad protection for free speech, and free speech isn't limited to words or symbols. I don't know about you, but I am not that culturally astute. So when I go into a hotel and I see these paintings that have just like all kinds of spray paint and things, it means nothing to me. It's not art to me. but it was art to that painter. And the Supreme Court has said that things like that are covered under the protection of the First Amendment. So it extends much broader to beyond words and symbols, but to visual art and to custom expression. And that's, again, what we're talking about, is things that are created specifically for a customer and a specific event. And the last thing that I just want to add is when we think about how this law applies, we need to think much broader to words and symbols, because the ACLU has been involved in one way or another in almost every case up here. And the governments that have been involved in every case up here have actually taken the position in open court that poets, painters, graphic designers who are using words and symbols can be compelled to express messages against their convictions. So this is much bigger than just whether you do the cake or the flowers or do the wedding, show weddings through videos. It's words and symbols are at play here as well. And we all sink or swim together on it.
Barron, did I see that you wanted to jump in on this? Because you made the birthday flowers for Rob.
Right.
Why not the wedding flowers?
Wedding flowers are so different. You spend months, sometimes years, with the bride and groom. You find out their likes, their dislikes, how they met, what their hobbies are, their colors, what do they want to express in the wedding, and what message do they want to send about their love. And so when we make the bouquets, just like when Jack makes the cake, it's part of them. And we want to symbolize that. We want to let the wedding people know that this is what they are and this is what they represent. Many times I'll go to the wedding, help the bride get dressed, sew a button on a tux, set the flowers up. There's so much involved. But to create something that would go totally against my faith, which teaches me that marriage is between a man and a woman, and Christ's relationship with his church, that's something that we cannot do.
So I'm sensitive for the time, but I want to get a couple more questions in. We started a little late, so we might go a little longer. Bear with us, but only a little. Carl and Angel, your case is a pre-enforcement case. And so I'm going to ask you to explain what that is, or you can pitch the question to the lawyer to explain what that is. But one of the criticisms people have had is, why seek this out? Why not wait for someone to sue you? Why proactively go and seek a pre-enforcement injunction to protect your rights? Why bring this controversy upon you and your 8 kids and your family? Why not just keep your heads down?
These are stories worth telling. We want to tell the story of marriage through the lens of the way we view the world. But a little parentheses on that, we want to make sure that everyone has the freedom to live according to their conscience. So it's much broader than the marriage issue alone. So for creative professionals, every single person I work with has a no list. They have things they simply won't do. And we want to protect the freedom for every single creative professional to live according to those beliefs without fear of government punishment. So in Minnesota, our situation is if we enter into the wedding market and begin telling the stories that we're passionate about, that we want to influence the narrative culture on, we would be forced by law to accept projects that tell an exactly opposite narrative. And if we don't, it's 90 days in jail and $25,000 fine and triple compensatory damages. It's incredible the amount of legal force that's against us. So to enter into that marketplace and say, I hope nothing happens, would be foolish. And then to answer the last component on that is this loving? Is this the right thing to do? Why are we picking a fight? I think the answer is twofold. I don't want anyone to be under that same compulsion. I don't want anyone to have this fear that if I say what I really believe and if I live according to my convictions, to have those weights of jail time and fees and potentially losing everything, that's not good for anyone. So we want to help and we want to defend. Where you see an injustice, to do nothing is to participate in the injustice itself.
Thank you. Blaine, I said I would get back to it when you said there was other stuff. Mm-hmm. Tell us what it's cost you personally to stand up for the truth of this question, to stand by your convictions. 5 years now.
Well, there's been a lot of things, but I think that I'll kind of go to the darkest hour that we had. I can go back to that when the media hit, and our local paper, they had a front page spread against us. They had tied in the mayor, came out against us. The University of Kentucky that we had worked with for 20 years as their top vendor. They dropped us, several other businesses. It was a concerted effort before we even had a chance to say anything. It just came out. And so that day I came home and my wife had made the mistake, I think we all do, to read social media, not a wise thing, and a lot of things being said. And so we went down to the bedroom and I mean, we really were just broken. And at that time, I got a phone call from a business associate of mine, and he owns 17 stores, and they sell UK products. They have 120 employees, and he just got off the phone with UK, and he said, Blaine, they're threatening to pull our license because of our association with you. And he said, are you sure about this decision? And so, that was kind of the moment that Amy and I remember hanging up the phone, and we just literally fell on the floor and just began to weep and just say, God, no matter what the cost, we'll serve you, but, please don't let these people lose their jobs. And interesting, someone knocked on our door. Our church had come in at that moment and just came in and prayed with us, prayed over us, and didn't know this was going on, but 60 miles away, the gentleman who called me, his church showed up. They came and they prayed over him. And it was just maybe an hour or so later, he called me. And interesting enough, he's a Navy SEAL, so in his way, he was like, Blaine, we got this. He's like, you've got to stay the course. And so it was confirmation that, no matter what the cost was, it was an encouragement that we had to hold to what our conscience felt like we should do. And so the reason I share that story is just thankfully we haven't had to lay off anyone in the company. We have 32 employees. And so there's been a great personal cost for sure, just in terms of the things that we've had to deal with along the way. But that for sure was probably our darkest hour.
What would you tell other business owners facing a similar decision?
That's a good question. I think we all, at some point in our life, we're going to find ourselves at a crossroads, kind of where we've got an issue of conscience, where we know there's something that we need to do, but maybe it's because of fear or because of the easy road, we decide to go against our conscience. And I feel like when we make that choice, we lose something. Something's lost. And in my case, what would have been lost is freedom, is that freedom would have been chipped away at. And, we can't just kick the can for the next generation to kind of deal with these things. That if we get to a place where, out of fear of the government, that we can't live by our conscience, then freedom dies. And so, to other business owners, just prepare and yourself to know that to be led by your conscience, when you know the right thing to do, that you do it.
Jack, Blaine shared some of the costs and why he's standing up for this. I want to ask you some of those costs. You've mentioned the death threats. You mentioned the fearing for your daughter and granddaughter. But I think some of the emotional costs in your particular situation may be the most costly. And can you tell us, during the hearing, when the Colorado Commission that was adjudicating your case, what was said about you and your decision?
Yeah, the commissioner of the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, first of all, she thinks that religious freedom is despicable rhetoric. She says it's been used to acknowledge or to perpetrate whatever, different things like slavery and the Holocaust. And so she's comparing not making a cake to slavery and Hitler's Holocaust. And I found that particularly personally offensive because my dad was a World War II vet. And he landed on Normandy. He fought through France and Germany. He was wounded by a mortar at some point. They sent him back to England, patched him up, sent him back to combat. He said it's because they liked his work. But he had to continue fighting through the end of World War II, and he was part of a group that helped liberate one of the first concentration camps, Buchenwald. And he talked about the horror of that, the smell of the prison camp. he made notes in a book, World War II book that we had that described that, and he wrote on the bottom, when the paragraph in the book described how horrible it was, he wrote, "This is true." It was there. And for this woman who holds, in essence, my future to compare, not making a cake, and it's just the cake. I've never turned away these people. It's just to refuse to make this one cake for this event that goes against the core of who I am. It is just ridiculous.
What has happened in terms of the other penalties from the commission in terms of re-educating your staff and what you can and cannot do going forward?
Yeah, the commission also ruled that I'm required now to make cakes for same-sex weddings. And so in order to comply with that ruling and obey the law, we decided that we wouldn't make weddings at all. So that was 40% of our business, so we lost that. Before the 2 men came into my shop, I had 10 employees. Now I have 4, and that counts me. So I have a full-time delivery guy. These people, friends, are now not working for me. So that's an emotional cost too, because you enjoy working with people, their family, their friends, and now that's been taken away.
This may be your last chance on this panel. What would you say to someone else facing a similar decision?
We decided when we opened the shop which cakes we would do, which cakes we wouldn't do, and we knew same-sex weddings weren't really on the radar then, but we did talk about them. Other cakes that we talked about we wouldn't do, we knew when they came up, sorry folks, we can't do that for you. So we were already accustomed to making our stand where our line was. And when this came up, we knew where the line was.
Tell us some of those other cakes. I didn't get a chance to ask you about those earlier, but...
Oh, we don't do Halloween cakes. We don't do bachelor party cakes, cakes that are offensive, cakes that would denigrate people, anti-racial cakes, anti-American cakes, those kind of things.
There was a divorce cake, too, if I'm
Yeah, somebody asked me one time to create a half of a 3-tier wedding cake, just cut it in half because he wanted to celebrate his divorce. And my thinking is, in this other half of this divorce, somebody's been hurt.
So you said no to all of those.
Yeah.
You never got sued.
Yeah, oddly enough. Just this one event that's so central.
I'm going to turn it to the attorney, and then we're going to close out with Barron Ellis, because I feel like we should close with the grandmother's wisdom. Seems fitting. But Kristen, for the people in this room who aren't Supreme Court watchers, what can we expect? What's next for Jack? What's the trajectory for the next year? And most importantly, how can we help?
Well, for Jack, we just filed our opening brief with the Supreme Court last Thursday, and on September 7th, amicus briefs will be filed. Those are friend of the court briefs that will be filed in support of Jack. We're hoping for about 40 different amicus briefs that will be filed on Jack's behalf. And then after that, the other side will file their briefs in October, and we'll have a reply in November. We don't know yet when the Supreme Court will schedule the oral argument, but we believe it will probably be in late November or early December. Barron Ellis' case is also pending at the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court decides whether to hear a case. It decided to hear Jack's case. And for Barron Ellis, it's currently in the process of considering whether to hear her case. We believe that the court will either agree to hear her case and hear it with Jack's, or it will hold it pending its decision in Jack. So in many ways, this brother and sisterhood will prevail throughout the next year, and we would expect that in June of next year we would have a ruling by the court. But before you go to Barron Ellis, Ryan, I think one of the neat things about Jack's case is it wasn't the case that we all expected the court to grant. It set a record in terms of how many times the court would consider whether to grant it. And we got up into 14, 15 times where it was rescheduled and we were waiting. Most people said, oh no, the court's writing a dissent, they won't hear it. But one day, the court did decide to hear it. And I think it would be fun to hear just for a minute what happened on that day for Jack.
So somebody introduced me to the website SCOTUS blog, which
They know.
so you're all familiar with. So on Mondays on SCOTUS blog, they announce whatever decisions and rulings the court made the following week, including would I be reconferenced, would I be denied, would I be granted. And so late June, the last day of the term, I'm watching the screen and I see Masterpiece is granted. Okay, so you see I get emotional about different things. But I couldn't breathe. Just looked at that and go. And the only one I had to share it with was a homeless guy who comes into the bakery. So I looked over and said, hey, are you gonna go to the Supreme Court? Yeah, I gotta go to court on Wednesday. Little different situation. Yeah.
But I think that does show Jack's heart, as you can see all of the people on this panel. I spent a week in Colorado a couple weeks ago, and this man came in every morning, and Jack gave him his coffee and served him faithfully. Didn't expect anything in return, and that's who these people are. They love to serve everyone.
Barron, now close us out. Words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom. Well, this was not on my bucket list to do before I died. But if we lose this case, we lose everything. We lose our business, our retirement, our life savings, everything we've worked for our kids and our grandkids, because the attorney fees are going to be well over 7 figures. Our employees lose their job. The city loses their taxes. My suppliers lose our business, simply because we don't have the same idea of marriage that Kurt and Rob have. They have every right to live the way they believe. We are only asking for the same freedom. And when my grandkids or great-grandkids come up and say, Grandma, what happened to your flower shop? How come, what happened to our faith? I don't want to look at them and say, I did nothing.
Thank you. So I believe we have a short 45-second video that we're going to show on the side monitors that Kelsey Harkness is a senior news producer here at the Heritage Foundation for the Daily Signal that she's just released this morning, and it profiles Jack and his story and his case. And so the full video you can find on YouTube. You can find it on the Daily Signal's site. But we just want to show a 45-second teaser, and then I'll close this out in a minute.
I don't have the vocabulary for it, but for someone to compare trying to live by your faith to a person who brought on the Holocaust or to slave owners is just, it's insulting, it's ridiculous. I don't have the words for it, but it's wrong.